ever stop to think about what makes you, well, you?
Hmm.
It's really your memories, isn't it? Everything from, basic skills to the face of someone you love.
Absolutely. It shapes our entire identity.
And as our source material from Self Sensei puts it so well, without memory, we'd be adrift in a perpetual present.
Yeah.
that's that's pretty powerful stuff.
It really is. It highlights that memory isn't just about, like, looking backwards.
No,
It's fundamental to how we navigate the world, moment by moment.
exactly. And that's what we're really digging into today. The science behind how our brains actually capture information
Yeah.
and then pull it back up later. We're
Hmm.
using the material from Self Sensei to get a good understanding of this incredible process.
Right.
So our mission for you listening in is pretty simple. Get a clear handle on the main stages that's encoding, storage, and retrieval.
The big three.
Yeah, and to really appreciate just how complex and, dynamic your memory actually is. Think of this as your like express route to getting informed on memory science.
And a key point from Self-Sensei is that these stages, encoding, storage, retrieval, they aren't really separate boxes.
Right.
They're deeply interconnected. A successful memory depends on all of them working together smoothly.
Absolutely. It's more like a relay race than, three separate sprints.
Good analogy.
And when we say memory, it's not just one single thing, is it?
No, not at all. It's actually a whole collection of different systems.
Right.
Well, you've got your working memory for short-term stuff, episodic memory for specific events, semantic memory for general facts,
Ah,
and even implicit memory for skills you do without thinking. Self-Sensei gives a great overview of this whole landscape.
okay, fascinating. So let's start at the beginning then. Stage one, encoding.
Right, encoding. So as Self-Sensei explains it, this is the initial step, taking in all that sensory information,
Sights, sounds, feelings.
exactly, and transforming it into a kind of neural code, something the brain can actually hold on to.
Like saving a file on a computer.
Yeah.
That analogy from the source makes sense.
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it. You're converting raw input into a format your system can understand and store.
Got it. Taking all that data and making it usable for the brain later. And what's interesting is that this encoding,
Mhm.
it's happening constantly, right?
All the time. We're prolific processors.
But it's also selective. We can't possibly record every single tiny detail.
That's a really crucial point. Imagine Self-Sensei uses the example of walking across a busy campus.
Okay.
There's just so much going on, sights, sounds, smells. Your brain is taking it in, but it's filtering. It decides what's important enough to actually encode properly.
So you might remember waving to a friend,
Vividly, yeah.
but not like the pattern on every paving stone you walked over.
Exactly. You prioritize.
And this initial taking in, it happens in sort of two main ways, doesn't it? There's the stuff that just sticks without us trying,
Automatic processing.
and then the things we really have to work at.
Precisely. So automatic processing, as Self-Sensei describes it, handles things like the passage of time, where things were in space, how often you encounter something, even the basic meaning of words.
And it happens without conscious effort.
Often, yeah. Like remembering what you had for lunch yesterday, you probably didn't consciously try to memorize it.
No, I definitely wasn't quizzing myself on my sandwich ingredients.
Right. Just encoded itself.
But then there's the other kind, effortful processing.
And that's where you really have to focus your attention and deliberately work to get information into memory.
Like studying for an exam.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or learning a totally new skill, like learning to drive or juggling.
Oh yeah, parallel parking required some serious effortful processing for me.
Tell me about it. But what's interesting is the source notes is that with practice, effortful processing can actually become more automatic.
Ah, okay.
Think about an experienced musician. They aren't consciously thinking about every single finger placement anymore.
It becomes second nature, like the brain puts it on autopilot after a while.
Precisely. It gets more efficient.
Now, Self-Sensei also talks about this encoding spectrum, which I found really helpful. It's like different ways the brain captures information depending on the senses involved.
Yeah, it's fascinating how varied these initial pathways are. You've got visual encoding first.
Processing images, layouts.
Right. And this lands initially in what's called iconic memory. But it's incredibly brief, like a flash.
A fleeting snapshot.
Exactly. And as Self-Sensei points out, these visual details vanish really quickly if we don't process them more deeply.
So just seeing something doesn't guarantee you'll remember it long term.
Not at all. It needs more work.
Like trying to recall a license plate you only glanced at, gone in an instant.
Then there's acoustic encoding.
Sounds, words, that inner voice we use.
That's part of it, yeah. That mental repetition, that inner monologue, can be surprisingly effective for holding on to verbal info.
Especially important for language.
Definitely. But maybe the most powerful type for creating lasting memories, according to Self-Sensei, is semantic encoding.
Okay, semantic. That's about meaning, right?
Exactly. Processing based on meaning and how it connects to what you already know.
Like knowing Paris is the capital of France. It's not just the sound Paris.
Right. It's linked to a whole network of related knowledge: France, capitals, Europe.
So understanding something makes it stick better. That's a key takeaway.
A crucial one. Making those connections to existing knowledge is like a fundamental principle for building strong, long-lasting memories.
Makes sense. What else is on the spectrum?
Well, there's tactile encoding too, how things feel,
Touch.
touch, but also maybe smell and taste. Think about how a certain smell can just instantly trigger a really vivid memory.
Oh, absolutely. Like the smell of rain on hot pavement takes me right back to summer holidays.
See, that's tactile, or maybe olfactory encoding at work. Then Self-Sensei highlights elaborative encoding.
Which sounds like taking semantic encoding up a notch.
Kind of, yeah. It's about actively relating new information to things you already know, creating richer, more meaningful links.
So not just understanding the meaning, but connecting it deeply.
Precisely. If you're learning about, say, a historical event, you think about its causes, its effects, how it compares to other events you know.
You're weaving it into your existing knowledge web.
Exactly. The more connections you make, the stronger that memory trace becomes. That's a really key insight. Connect to learn.
It's like building extra mental hooks to retrieve it later.
Okay, and the last one mentioned is organizational encoding.
Right. Basically, categorizing information, identifying relationships between items.
Like grouping fruits together in your mind?
Yeah, or remembering that a robin and a sparrow are both types of birds. Imposing that structure makes information easier for the brain to handle, store, and, importantly, recall later. Structure aids memory.
Okay, that whole spectrum makes a lot of sense. Now, this all seems to tie into that levels of processing framework. Self-Sensei mentions Craik and Lockhart's idea.
It does, very nicely.
The core idea being that how deeply we analyze information when we first encounter it, that determines how well we remember it later. Exactly. The depth of processing is key. And they made this really useful distinction between shallow and deep processing.
Shallow being.
Focusing on superficial features, how something looks, how it sounds. Self-Sensei gives examples like noticing if a word is in capital letters.
Or if it rhymes with another word.
Right. It doesn't take much mental effort, but the memory trace it creates is generally weaker, more for short-term holding.
Like repeating a phone number over and over just to dial it. That's maintenance rehearsal, right?
Exactly. You're keeping it active, but you're not really processing its meaning deeply. It's not great for long-term memory.
So deep processing is the opposite.
Right. That's where you engage with the meaning of the information, the semantic encoding we just talked about.
This takes more effort.
It does. You're thinking about what it signifies, relating to other things, maybe creating mental images, but the payoff is a much more durable memory trace.
So the key insight here is focus on meaning for better memory.
Absolutely. The more you think about what something means, the better you'll remember it long term.
And that example, Self-Sensei uses picturing a hippo on campus to remember the hippocampus's role in episodic memory.
Brilliant, isn't it?
That's making it meaningful, memorable. That's elaborative rehearsal.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Creating that vivid, meaningful connection. And why is deep processing better? Because it builds richer, more interconnected representation.
Or pathways.
Yeah, it links the new stuff to your existing mental frameworks, your schemas, as Self-Sensei calls them. This makes the memory more distinct.
Stands out more.
Right. And it gives you more potential retrieval paths later, like having multiple rows to the same place. If one's blocked, you can try another.
So it's not just about time spent, but how you spend that time engaging with the information.
Quality over just quantity of processing time.
Okay. But beyond the depth of processing, Self-Sensei points out other critical factors for strong encoding. First one, attention.
Oh, absolute fundamental. Because encoding is selective, like we said.
Right.
If your attention is divided, trying to listen to this while scrolling your phone.
Guilty as charged sometimes.
We all are. But your brain's ability to effectively encode the information plummets. Multitasking is really the enemy of good memory formation.
So the key takeaway, be present. Be focused.
You got it. It's like trying to take a clear photo with a shaky hand otherwise.
Sense. Another huge factor, emotion.
Yes. It's amazing how vividly we remember things that trigger strong feelings.
Why is that?
Well, Self-Sensei explains it involves the amygdala, the brain's emotion hub, working closely with the hippocampus.
Ah, the memory indexer.
Right. Emotional events get flagged as important, basically. This triggers deeper encoding, stronger consolidation, maybe involving stress hormones.
So it gets prioritized.
Kind of. Evolutionarily, it makes sense to strongly remember threats or big rewards,
Like
right?
survival instinct.
And emotion just grabs and holds our attention, too. So
Yep.
the takeaway, emotional experiences often leave a really lasting imprint.
They really stick. Okay, what else? Distinctiveness.
Yeah, things that are unique or novel tend to get encoded better.
Stand out from the crowd.
Exactly. If something is unusual, it creates a more unique memory trace, less likely to get confused with other memories later. Self-Sensei mentions the von Ristorff effect.
The odd one out is remembered better.
That's the one. They even suggest using, like, bizarre imagery as a memory technique to leverage this.
Make it weird to make it memorable.
Kind of. The insight is making information distinctive helps it stick.
Like remembering the one person wearing a bright yellow hat in a sea of gray suits.
Perfect example. We also touched on rehearsal-type elaborative beats, rote repetition.
Right. Meaningful connections.
But another crucial factor Self-Sensei emphasizes is the spacing effect.
Ah, spreading out learning versus cramming.
Exactly. Spaced repetition reviewing material at increasing intervals over time is way more effective for long-term memory than mass practice, aka cramming.
Why does that work better?
Self-Sensei suggests it allows time for memory consolidation, for the memory trace to stabilize in the brain.
Let it sink in.
Sort of. And think about that Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, how quickly we forget things initially. Spacing out reviews directly counteracts that decline.
So, little and often beats one massive session. Key takeaway for students everywhere.
Absolutely, spread out your studying.
And finally, sleep. We know we feel fuzzy without it, but it affects encoding before learning, too.
It does. Self-Sensei points out that getting enough sleep before you even try to learn something is critical.
How so?
Sleep directly impacts our ability to pay attention, to concentrate, and it affects how well our neurons function. Trying to encode new information when you're sleep deprived.
It's like trying to run uphill through mud.
Pretty much. Your brain is just not operating at peak efficiency. So the insight, a well-rested brain is a much better learning machine.
Okay, that covers a lot of ground on how we encode. But what's actually happening inside the brain during all this? Self-Sensei gives us a look at the machinery.
Yeah, and it's not just one spot. It's a whole network of interconnected regions working together.
Starting with the big one, the hippocampus.
Absolutely central, especially for encoding new declarative memories, our memories for events, episodic and facts, semantic.
The brain's indexer, you called it.
Self-Sensei uses that term, and it's apt. It binds together the different elements, the what, where, when of an experience. It's also crucial for spatial memory.
Finding your way around.
Right, and it plays a vital role in that initial memory consolidation, making new memories more stable over time. The tragic case of patient HM who lost his hippocampus.
He couldn't form new memories, right?
Exactly. It starkly showed how essential it is.
So the hippocampus is like the librarian cataloging new experiences. What about the amygdala? We mentioned it with emotion.
Right. It modulates encoding, especially for those emotionally charged events. It works closely with the hippocampus.
How?
Well, the emotional arousal, maybe involving stress hormones, seems to enhance the encoding and consolidation processes happening in the hippocampus. It's like the amygdala flags certain memories. Pay attention. Store this one well.
Giving it an important tag for storage.
Okay.
And the prefrontal cortex, the front part of the brain.
The PFC. It's heavily involved, especially in that effortful processing we discussed.
That conscious effort stuff.
Yeah. Self-Sensei highlights its role in working memory, organizing information, relating it to what we already know. Those elaborative strategies.
And making connections again.
Exactly. Interestingly, the left PFC often lights up during semantic encoding, suggesting a role in processing meaning. It really helps build those strong, meaningful, long-term memories. Think of it as the strategic planner during encoding.
Organizing and making sense of it all before filing it away. What about the cerebellum? I thought that was mostly for movement.
It is crucial for motor control, yes, but it's also the primary site for encoding implicit memories.
Like skills.
Procedural skills, exactly. Riding a bike, playing piano. Also classically conditioned responses.
So different memory types use different encoding centers.
Largely, yes. Someone with hippocampal damage might not remember learning a new motor skill, but their cerebellum still allows them to perform it better over time. It shows the separation.
Fascinating. So it's not one size fits all. And this isn't just about brain regions, is it? It goes down to the molecular level.
Oh, absolutely. Fundamentally, encoding involves changes in how neurons communicate. Self-sensei introduces long-term potentiation, LTP.
LTP.
It's a long-lasting strengthening of the connections, the synapses, between neurons that happens after repeated activity between them.
Stronger connections, memory.
That's the leading theory. It involves complex molecular cascades, new proteins being made, even changes in gene expression. LTP is thought to be the physical basis of a memory trace.
Wow. So our memories are literally encoded in how our brain cells connect and talk to each other.
That's the idea. From big brain structures down to tiny synaptic changes, all working together to capture our experiences.
Amazing. Okay, so we've encoded it, hopefully stored it well. Now, how do we get it back out? Let's talk retrieval.
Right. Retrieval. Bringing that stored information back into conscious awareness or using it to guide behavior. Basically, remembering.
And it's not like hitting play on a recording, you said?
No, Self-Sensei really emphasizes this. It's an active, reconstructive process.
Reconstructive.
Yeah, each time we retrieve a memory, we're essentially rebuilding it. And this process can actually introduce subtle changes over time.
So memories can change just by remembering them?
It seems so. The key insight. Remembering isn't always a perfect replay of the past.
That's slightly unnerving, but interesting. And Self-Sensei mentions the testing effect here, too.
Right. The act of successfully retrieving information actually strengthens the memory trace.
So testing yourself is actually a really good way to learn.
One of the best. It forces retrieval, which reinforces the memory.
Okay, so how do we retrieve? Self-Sensei outlines different modes. Recall is one.
Recall is bringing information to mind without the target being right there as a cue, like an essay question on a test.
And there are different kinds. Free recall.
Remembering items in any order. That's where you often see primacy and recency effects, remembering the first and last things best.
Right. Then serial recall.
Order matters there, like a phone number or steps in a sequence,
And cued recall.
where you get a specific hint or prompt, like what word started with B. The cue's effectiveness is crucial there.
Okay. Then there's recognition. That feels easier, usually.
It generally is. That's identifying something as familiar when you see it again, like multiple choice questions or recognizing a face.
The answer is right there, you just have to spot it.
Exactly. The item itself acts as the cue. And finally, there's relearning, or savings.
How does that work?
It measures memory by how much faster you can learn something the second time around, even if you can't consciously recall it from the first time.
So even if you think you've forgotten, some trace might still be there.
Exactly. It's often the most sensitive measure of retention. Your brain has a head start.
Okay. Now, Self-Sensei really flags the power of cues in retrieval.
Absolutely central. Cues are like the keys that unlock stored memories.
And the encoding specificity principle is key here.
Fundamental, yes. Proposed by Tolving and Thompson. It basically says retrieval cues work best when they match the conditions present during the original encoding.
How you learned it dictates how best to retrieve it.
Precisely. Context matters, which leads to things like context-dependent memory.
Remembering better in the same place you learned it, like that diver study?
That's the classic example, yeah.
Yeah.
Learning underwater versus on land. Your external environment becomes part of the memory trace.
And it works for internal states, too. State-dependent memory.
Right, your mood, your physiological state.
Yeah.
If it matches the state you were in during learning, recall can be better.
So if you learn something while happy, you might recall it better when happy again.
That's the idea. Your internal state acts as a cue. Emotions can be powerful retrieval cues.
Wow, so external and internal context matters, but cues aren't always perfect. Cue overload.
Right. If a single cue gets linked to too many different memories, it becomes less effective for retrieving any one specific memory.
Too many doors for one key.
Kind of. Distinctive, specific cues work best because they point more directly to the target memory. A specific cue beats a general one.
Okay. And all this suggests that forgetting, often it's not that the memory is gone, but that we can't find it.
Exactly. Retrieval failure. The information might still be stored, but we lack the right key, the right cue to access it at that moment.
Which explains those frustrating tip-of-the-tongue moments.
Precisely. It feels so close because it's likely still in there somewhere.
Okay, so retrieval is complex. What's the brain doing during this active search and reconstruction? Let's look at the retrieval engine.
Like encoding, it's a network affair. The prefrontal cortex, PFC, is again a major player.
The executive control center.
Exactly. Self-Sensei describes it as initiating and guiding the search, especially for effortful recall. It's like the librarian actively looking for the right book.
Directing the search party.
And it also monitors and evaluates what comes back. Does this feel right? Is this relevant?
Checking the quality of the retrieved memory.
Yeah. The right PFC seems involved in monitoring, the left more in semantic processing of what's retrieved. And damage here can lead to confabulation, those unintentional false memories. It works closely with the hippocampus, of course.
Ah, yes, the hippocampus. Crucial for encoding, crucial for retrieval, too.
Definitely. Especially for retrieving those detailed episodic memories. Self-Sensei highlights two key processes it performs: pattern completion and pattern separation.
Pattern completion. Filling in the blanks from a partial cue.
That's it. A whiff of perfume triggers a whole memory that's pattern completion. Relies heavily on a region called CA3.
And pattern separation, keeping similar memories distinct.
Right, so you don't mix up this Tuesday's meeting with last Tuesday's meeting. It helps to differentiate similar experiences. That's linked more to the dentate gyrus area.
So the hippocampus needs to both complete memories from fragments and keep similar memories separate. A balancing act.
A critical one for accurate recall. Errors in either can lead to memory mistakes.
Makes sense. What about the parietal cortex? Self-Sensei mentions it in retrieval, too.
Yeah, its role is interesting. Neuroimaging shows it's active during successful retrieval, but damage doesn't cause the profound amnesia you see with hippocampal damage.
So what's it doing?
It seems heavily involved in attention related to memory. The attention to memory, ADAM model, suggests different parts do different things.
Like?
The dorsal part seems involved in top-down, intentional attention, actively searching using cues. The ventral part seems more about bottom-up attention when a retrieved memory just grabs your attention, especially if it's vivid.
So one part actively searches, the other notices when something relevant pops up.
That's a good way to put it. And other regions chip in too, of course.
Like the neocortex.
Where long-term memories are likely stored, it gets reactivated during retrieval. The amygdala retrieves emotional flavor.
And the cerebellum.
And striatum, yeah. Crucial for retrieving those implicit procedural memories, the skills. It's a whole brain symphony.
It really is an intricate dance, but as we all know too well, it doesn't always work perfectly. Let's talk about forgetting and, well, when memory fails us.
Right. And it's important to remember, as Self-Sensei notes, that forgetting isn't always bad. Sometimes it's adaptive, helps us clear out clutter, focus on what's relevant.
True. So why do we forget? Decay theory is one idea.
The idea that memory traces just fade over time, if unused, like a path getting overgrown.
Seems intuitive.
It does. But it's hard to prove time alone is the culprit for long-term memories. Interference is another major theory.
Other memories getting in the way.
Exactly. Two types. Proactive interference.
Old stuff messing up recall of new stuff, like your old phone number interfering with remembering your new one.
Perfect example. And retroactive interference is the opposite.
New stuff messing up recall of old stuff. Learning Spanish makes it harder to remember the French you learned years ago.
Precisely. New learning overwrites or interferes with the old.
Okay, then there's retrieval failure theory, which we touched on.
The memory is there, but you can't access it. Lack of the right cues. Tip of the tongue is the classic example.
So frustrating, it feels right there.
It probably is, just temporarily inaccessible.
Yeah.
And finally, motivated forgetting.
Actively trying to forget.
Yeah, either conscious suppression, trying to push it away, or maybe unconscious repression, though that's more debated. The PFC might actively inhibit memory regions to help this happen.
The brain's forget button, maybe. Okay, so we forget. But sometimes our memories aren't just gone, they're wrong.
Yes. Memory is reconstructive, remember. That makes it malleable, susceptible to errors.
How so? Schemas.
Those mental frameworks we have. They can bias how we encode things and how we reconstruct them during retrieval. We might fill in gaps with schema-consistent details that weren't actually there.
Like assuming there were books in a professor's office because, well, professors have books.
Exactly, even if that specific office didn't. And then there's the misinformation effect.
Hearing misleading info after an event taints the original memory.
Yes. Leading questions, suggestions, they can get incorporated into your recollection, maybe during memory reconsolidation when the memory is retrieved and becomes temporarily unstable.
Scary how easily memories can be altered. And source monitoring errors.
Forgetting where a memory came from. Did I experience it or just dream it? Did I read it in a reliable source or just hear it as gossip?
And this can lead to believing things that aren't true.
Definitely. Or even developing completely false memories.
Vivid memories of things that never happened at all.
It's possible. They can be implanted through suggestion or arise spontaneously through reconstruction and source confusion. Brain scans might even look similar to true memories.
Wow. Our memory is powerful, but clearly fallible. And Self-Sensei briefly mentions memory disorders, which really drive home how vital these systems are.
Amnesia, pathological memory loss, anterograde amnesia.
Can't form new memories, often hippocampal damage like HM
Right. And retrograde amnesia is losing memories from before the injury or disease onset.
and Alzheimer's.
A progressive neurodegenerative disease. Often starts in the hippocampus, causing anterograde amnesia first, then spreads, affecting older memories too, causing retrograde amnesia, associated with plaques and tangles in the brain.
Devastating. And Korsakoff's syndrome.
Often linked to chronic alcoholism and thiamine deficiency. Damages areas like the thalamus and PFC. Causes severe amnesia, both anterograde and retrograde, and often that characteristic confabulation.
Baking up memories unintentionally.
Due to impaired reality monitoring, it just highlights the catastrophic consequences when these brain systems break down.
Absolutely. It really puts the everyday miracle of memory into perspective. So, bringing this all together, this deep dive using Self-Sensei, it shows memory as this incredibly dynamic, multi-stage thing.
Encoding, storage, retrieval, all happening in complex brain networks. Encoding shaped by attention, emotion, depth of processing.
Retrieval being that active reconstruction, heavily reliant on cues, orchestrated by regions like the PFC and hippocampus.
And critically, remembering that memory isn't perfect. It's malleable, prone to forgetting, prone to distortion.
But understanding the science, as Self-Sensei implies, has real practical value, doesn't it?
Huge value. Knowing about elaborative rehearsal, spaced repetition, the testing effect. These inform effective learning strategies.
Things you can actually do to learn better.
Exactly. And lifestyle factors matter too. Sleep, exercise, diet, managing stress. They all impact brain health and cognitive function, including memory.
And knowing about memory's fallibility, it makes you maybe a bit more critical.
Hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
More critical of our own recollections and maybe the confident accounts of others sometimes.
Good point. And research is ongoing, constantly revealing more.
Absolutely. Exploring molecular details using advanced neuroimaging like fMRI, PT scans, developing computational models, even techniques like optogenetics to manipulate specific neurons.
All aiming to understand memory better, maybe enhance it, and definitely find ways to treat those devastating disorders.
It's a really exciting field.
It truly is. So for you listening, maybe take a moment after this. How might understanding encoding and retrieval change how you approach learning something new? Or even how you think about your own past? Because memory, as Self-Sensei so eloquently puts it, really is the dynamic process that defines our past, shapes our present, and guides our future.